Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this presentation by Social Venture Partners on this amazing film that I hope you have all had a chance to view prior to our session this afternoon. We will be speaking with many of the folks involved in the production of the film, and we will also be speaking with some local leaders about the relevance of it in today, particularly here in our own Dallas community. I would like to welcome Evans Risher, who is the filmmaker and with EMR Video Productions. So we welcome Evans to our panel today and to the discussion. We have Thomas Muhammad, the producer, who will be with us if he is not here yet. He is the inspiration behind the film and will be joining us shortly, a community organizer, co-founder of the Inner City Community Development Corporation. And so we will welcome him as soon as he is able to join as well. We are so pleased to have George Baldur with us. George produced the film. He is the founder of the Latino Center for Leadership Development, chairman at DHA Housing Solutions, the founder of After 8 to Educate, and most importantly, he is a partner with Social Venture Partners, and we are thrilled to lift up this great creative work that he has backed. And so we welcome you, George, as well. We are also honored to have the Honorable Diane Ragsdale with us, who is the Managing Director of ICDC, a nonprofit community development corporation here in Dallas, and of course, a long history as a Dallas activist and served on the Dallas City Council. So we are grateful for Diane's presence in the conversation as well. We are also pleased to have the Reverend Richie Butler with St. Luke's Community United Methodist Church. And I think we have all of our panelists. I don't know if I properly welcomed A. Peter Bailey. I see that he has joined us. He is the former associate of Malcolm X, founding member of the Org of Afro-American Unity, organized in 1964, served as a pallbearer at the funeral of Malcolm X, and is a lecturer and author and all-around Renaissance man. So we are grateful to you, Peter, for being with us. And Professor Bailey, we hope to get you in the conversation here in just a moment. But Evans, I wanted to start with you, if you don't mind. You were the filmmaker, and prior to us gathering, I was challenging whether you were even old enough, to know this personally. And here you turned out to be so. So I just wanted you to share a little bit about how you got involved. The film is beautiful. You did an amazing job with it. It is very poignant. And so I just wanted you to comment on how you got involved in it and how you feel about what you produced.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. My involvement in the film came at the introduction to Thomas Muhammad back in, I think it was around May of 2016. And he and I have never met personally before. My background as a journalist with the local ABC affiliate for 33 years, he reached out to me and we met, and he explained his desire to do this project on Malcolm X. And immediately it piqued my interest. His passion, his knowledge, his fire for the information to be spread about Malcolm X was the main goal for the project. And so he asked me to assemble a team to go and produce this video. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge. And so we assembled the team and met with George Baldur and Thomas, and we planned out a huge documentary to go all across the country to gather information and interviews and photos, some things that people have never heard or been witness to before. So it was an honor to be able to be a part of the crew that did this documentary. My knowledge of Malcolm X just was very minimal as far as my education goes, a couple of books that I've read, but it was an eye-opening experience for me. As a filmmaker, but also as an individual, to learn these things about his life, his family, his efforts for the civil rights movement. And also a pleasure to meet some of the people in the documentary, historical figures that people would be honored to be in the presence of, especially with A. Peter Bailey and some of the folks out of Selma, Alabama. It was a great opportunity. And I would just want to thank George Baldur. He was awesome to support this idea for Thomas Muhammad. Now, my participation was the technical side of it, assembling the crews, the video, the audio, the production of it. The producer, Laurie Myatt, from Fort Worth out of Grapevine, she was the writer and the producer and the organizer of the entire documentary, including our trek around the country in an RV to get from state to state. And that took quite a while, but we made it happen. I'm so pleased with the outcome of the project, Tony.
How many people were in the RV most of the time?
Let's see. I'm thinking probably about maybe up to 8 people.
Did you like these people? Did you all get along? I mean, you were in kind of close quarters there for all those days. How did that work?
How much do you want to know, Tony?
You know, being Italian, we fight a lot when there's more than 2 or 3 or 4. I can't even imagine 8 enclosed quarters. So how did it go?
Well, it went fine. You know, any project worth its mettle is going to come with some challenges. And riding around the country in an RV with 8 people was a challenge. And yes, there were some moments of, let's call it light bickering. And there was a little bit of dissension, but yes, I really like these people. I adored these people. I got to know Peter Bailey, and I'll tell you, he just took me under his wing and said, "Let me teach you something, young fella." And it was a pleasure meeting him and the other people who were participating in the film. Some of the crew members, I knew them personally. I chose them to be a part of it, so I was familiar with them. But as you can guess, just like a family traveling around the country, we had moments of great pleasure and moments of disagreement.
You handled that very well. You must be a politician yourself. You did great on that. George, I'm going to turn it to you. Tell me a little bit about how you came to be involved in the project in the first place.
Well, it was really something that just evolved. It wasn't really planned. It was out of a series of conversation with Thomas Muhammad. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Thomas for several years. And, you know, when we have a conversation, there's just so much history in his experience. He's been such a part of a lot of movements, particularly the Panther movement, and a lot of Dallas history, but also national history. He's been involved, as we see in the film, with, you know, organizations and people throughout the country that have been, you know, fighting for civil rights, human rights for decades and decades. It's who he is. And so as he was telling me more and more about these stories, I'm like more convinced that this needs to be put on film and this needs to be preserved, because, you know, there's so many stories that we hear. And as we know from having watched the film, you know, that, you know, what we learn from those that are there isn't necessarily the history or what we've been taught or what we've known as a community. Well, when we are taught something about Malcolm X. And so, you know, I think it's important as a historian that history is kept to be truthful, and whether it's good, bad, or ugly, you know, we need to know what the truth is. And so, you know, I think having the opportunity, Thomas was concerned about the health of some of those that are involved and, you know, that have been in this prime story. So we just decided just to jump at it and go and kind of to Evan's point, one of the things as we decided to do this project, that Thomas comes to me and says, you know, I guess I should tell you something, that Peter Bailey refuses to fly. You know, he was, we could talk to him about that. He said, once he retired, he said, I'm not forced to fly anymore. So I'm glad to do the project. I'm glad to help, but you know, it's not going to be on a plane. I'm not flying anywhere. So that's where the idea of renting an RV and doing a cross-country trip from it evolved. So it's just one of those things that kind of led to the final product. But the reality of it is, the basis of it was that Thomas and I were both in agreement that history needed to be told. Most of those that are interviewed, that talked and are part of this film, have really never made public comments about their background, their experience, and because they just felt like so many others in this experience have been capitalized on the name and in the experience of Malcolm X, and they didn't really want that to be part of their experience. So one of the agreements that we made early on is that no one involved in the film would receive any revenue from it, that it would not be any financial involvement with anyone. And so that really, you know, was the catalyst to get a lot of these interviews and a lot of these stories firsthand and for the first time. And so our purpose has really been for educational exchanges, and exactly what Tony, what Social Venture Partners is providing today, this forum right here. This is the purpose for us doing the film. But we know throughout history there are stories like Claudette Colvin's story that is kind of lost within history. You know, we know it as the Rosa Parks story, but it really is Claudette Colvin's story. And so if you let someone else tell your story, then you're not going to get all the facts, and you're not going to get, you know, the way things totally are. And so that's why we wanted to make sure we're able to preserve it the way we have been.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the reminder about not making any personal gain from the film. You know, if our audience would like to make a donation to SVP for the film, we are just giving that money right over to Paul Quinn College as a contribution to them and to the great work that they do here in our city. So if anyone would like to make a contribution, you can do that as well, and know that we will be making that to Paul Quinn College. Thomas, we are delighted that you are able to join us. I think you are on mute, but I'm going to turn it over to you. So if you can chat with us for a few moments, that would be wonderful. I know that this was a incredible undertaking for you. Had to be a real passion story for you. Tell us a little bit about, was it something that you always thought you wanted to do? How did it come about for you? Can you hear me okay, Thomas?
Okay, how's it?
That's good. I think we missed you. We have lost you again.
Okay, how's that?
There you go.
Yeah, I totally apologize. I am enjoying listening to the history, and I'm in a rehab center, so if I look a little odd here, it's because I'm working from a bed.
It was an incredible sacrifice for you to join us from a rehab center, and we hope your rehab is going well. So thank you for doing that and making that sacrifice.
Right. But it was totally an honor to be a part of this look back conversation on this awesome film about a very, very humble and special person. You know, Malcolm X was such an inspiration to so many young people like me throughout the years. And he has left a powerful legacy of the importance of giving and doing it unselfishly. So George gave us a beautiful opportunity to tell this story. And at the time, I didn't know how it would turn out. But looking back now, after, of course, making the film, but going to attend film festivals, and at one of the festivals to have 4 of Malcolm's daughters there to watch the film, and 2 of them literally cried tears and showed appreciation by giving me great big hugs, and I really do appreciate that acknowledgement. But they said that was because we made their father human. And it may sound strange to folks, but I would say this, and I'm done, and that is that for too many years, Malcolm has been seen as a monster because others have told his story from their different narratives, and many times the narratives was about characterizing him that way to kill that inspiration. It hasn't worked. It didn't work. But this film did that. When you see the film, what you come away with is Malcolm was a human being, and he just came at the right time and did the right thing on behalf of his people. And so, yeah, it was a total honor and a pleasure to do this film. And having said that, I'll finish there and listen if there's any other questions and join in with that.
Well, thank you, sir. And I think you're a pretty incredible human being for the inspiration that you provided for this, and for having a vehicle to speak the truth and to portray this American historical figure in a truthful and beautiful way. And so thank you for all that you've done for that and for the community at large. We appreciate that. Professor Bailey, it is an honor to have you with us. I think you're on mute too, so if you can go off mute, we might get a chance to chat. Thank you so much. What city are you visiting us from here in Dallas? Where are you?
Well, I live in Washington, D.C.
And so,
can you hear me?
Is it cold there? We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
How are you faring there? Are you okay weather-wise? Everything good?
Oh yes, it was 70 degrees today. We've had practically no snow this winter, which is very good for me. So I've always believed that snow is not beautiful in an urban community. Snow is not beautiful. It's
Well,
a pain, you know what?
That's right.
You know what? So we had some really nice weather today, and I am, still being very thankful that my family and myself, we haven't yet, except for 4 youngers. It's very weird. The only people in my family who've gotten this, of about 60 people who've gotten this virus, have been 4 younger members, 20, 25, 27, and 31. None of the senior members of my family have gotten it. So, and they all, recovered, with it. They did the 2 weeks quarantine at home and that kind of thing, and they came out well. So other than that, that's now something that has been like a plague as far as I'm concerned for the last year. But everything is cool now. I'm doing quite well. I have a little problem with a knee, but I guess at 83, you got to have something wrong at 83 years old.
We are glad that at 83 that's the only problem you're having, and we're so delighted that you would visit with us here in Dallas and with our audience. You know, I am a bit of a student myself on power and how people organize for power. And for you to get a bunch of sophisticated folks to go in an RV, you must be a very powerful man. So congratulations on that. And what did you think? What was the experience like? What do you think of the results?
Well, first of all, I when they agreed to do that, that's when I realized, I said, these brothers and sisters are serious. They are serious. Because, and I really was not trying to be difficult. It's just that after after a flight, I mean, I had flown many, many times, you know, on the staff of Ebony Magazine for 8 years. So flying, but I decided in 1985 that was it. I was not flying anymore. I ended up going to California twice on the train, you know, to do lectures on Brother Malcolm. And so when they called me about this trip, and I told them, I said, listen, you can interview me, but I can't get on no airplane. And next thing I know, they're saying we're gonna do this this thing in the, what do you call it? I call it a van. I think there's another name for it.
Right, an
RV. But we were doing this trip, like and so I said, that's when I said to myself, these folks are serious. And I decided, you know, to participate and contribute whatever I could to it. But I'm serious. That is, when they decided to do that, I say, they are serious. And that's when I decided to, you know, that I was going to really contribute as much as I could to the project. And I'm glad that I did, because I think other than a reunion that we had in 2006, those of us who had been members of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, we had in 2006, about 18 of us showed up for a reunion, which was an incredible event. Other than that, this was the most important thing that I've ever participated in terms of Brother Malcolm. So I was very glad to get a chance to go to Selma, you know, and so for me, it was a really, 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 really opportunity to talk to and learn from and meet people like, you know, Joanne Bland and the brothers and sisters down in Selma, to see the museum in Selma, to see where Brother Malcolm spoke at Brown Chapel, you know, so it turned out to me to be, as I said before, the only thing that topped it, as far as I was concerned, was the reunion that we had, the OAAU reunion we had in 2006.
Yeah. You know, I was very struck in the film about the role that you played, of course, and the commentary that you gave was all extraordinary. But when you talked about your mother's reaction to your association with Malcolm and her fear in her heart for your own safety, and you talked about how when, you know, she saw you as the pallbearer, that it was just more than she could bear. The intensity of that story alone showed how powerful the figure was and how difficult the times were. And I just really appreciated you sharing that insight and what that must have been like for you to stand there as a young man and do that.
Yes, I had, my mother was always very, very concerned about being involved with Brother Malcolm. Not because she disagreed with him, because she agreed with a lot of what he was saying, but she was just afraid, you know, that it was dangerous. And she was concerned about my being, you know, in danger. And so when after, you know, she almost went berserk when she found out that I was in the Audubon Ballroom on the day of the assassination. You know, that was bad enough. And so when I was invited by Sister Betty to be a pallbearer, I never told her. I said, I will not tell her this, because I know it'll cause a whole lot of problems for her. So I did not tell her. And on the day of the funeral, when we were coming out of the church, she was working as a licensed practical nurse at a hospital, and they had, some of the members in the hospital were watching television, watching the funeral services, but she wasn't watching them. But when they started coming out with with the casket, she said somebody said, oh, they're coming up with the with the body, and so she came to watch that. And of course, the first person to come through the door was me, with the casket. And she went completely hysterical, completely. Luckily, she was working in the hospital, so that, they were able to, to take care of her right away. And later, when she and I had an opportunity to talk, you know, she had cooled down, and I told her, I said, Mom, she said, you're right. She said, if you had told me that you were going to be a part of that funeral, it would never have happened. I don't care what I had to do, I would have stopped you. So she admitted that. And knowing my mom like I did, I knew that is exactly what she would have done. If she had to have somebody come and tie me up and lock me in, in a room somewhere, I would not have been a pallbearer. And again, not because she disliked Brother Malcolm, but because of her, her fear for me.
So I see where you got your power from, huh? It came from Mom.
Well, Dad was the same way, so he didn't talk very much. He was one of those people who said a few words, but when he did say something, you had better listen.
We certainly appreciate. We know that our audience received the link to watch the film, and so we are grateful that the audience did. And so I want to weave some of the themes from the film into what's going on in current times, if you will. And Ms. Ragsdale, I'd like to maybe turn to you for this section. I remember watching the funeral myself as a child on the television. And I also remember the rhetoric of how I grew up and what I was told, not in so many words, but an understanding was that Malcolm was bad and Martin was good. That was the rhetoric and the story that I grew up with. And so the film, obviously I came a long way in my understanding of that over the years. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to listen to the Reverend Cohn from the Chicago Theological Union. And I'm going to ask Reverend Butler a few questions about that. But what was your experience of it? How was Malcolm an influence to you and to your work that you have done in community organizing and representing the city and all of the work that you have done to this point?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of those individuals who were certainly very much a part of the film production, the inspiration. Certainly thank you, Thomas, and certainly George and Evans and Brother Bailey. I am forever just love you dearly. Thank you for all your sacrifices as well. One thing which is somewhat aligned with what Thomas said, one thing was that Malcolm loved people. I mean, he was a lover of people, and that's extremely important. And also what he was able to do for me, because I was able to see that Malcolm believed in a key principle. Matter of fact, one of the key principles that I hold really came from Malcolm, and that was the principle of self-determination. That indeed we should create institutions within our community to meet the needs of our people, but also we should create institutions that would force the elimination of systemic racism, the elimination of systemic sexism and classism. And so what Malcolm lifted up was basic fundamental principles of self-determination that I have internalized over the years. The principle of self-reliance that I have internalized over the years. And that's one of the reasons why I am a founding member of the South Dallas Fair Park Inner City Community Development Corporation, because it represents self-determination. It represents the creation of institutions to help people meet the needs. We are involved in affordable housing, business development, workforce development. And so we're involved in these different programs, if you will, to help provide self-reliance for individuals. But in addition to that, though, as you indicated, the position was Malcolm was bad and Martin was good. That was all about the oppressor attempting to diminish the movement. And so the key was to separate, was to divide. That was the purpose behind that. But I never really, be quite frank with you, I didn't buy it because I recognized we didn't have the time for division. And so did Malcolm and Martin recognize it as well. And the other thing was that when we would look at Brother Malcolm, we recognize that we have to continue to really fulfill his principles. And that's what we're doing now. I could go on and on with respect to what we must do to look at the pandemic. And because that's a reality. And one of the things that we have to look at is that we have to create institutions that eliminate structural racism. We can't just reform things. And that's another thing that Brother Malcolm, where he influenced me. It's not about reform. It's not about trying to repair a system that is rotten with racism, trying to repair a system that is rotten with elitism and sexism. But instead, we can't repair it. To be quite frank with you, we need to create new systems. We need to dismantle that which exists. We need to start over, a clean sheet. We need to, in essence, create new systems in order for us to move forward. The last thing that I want, and I often think about this because, here we are in 2021, and we find ourselves really fighting the same, should I say, the same issues, addressing the same problems time and time again. And part of that is because we continue to believe in reform. And I believe that Malcolm tried to deliver the message that we can't just believe in reform. We need to do structural change. And I know many of our young people are calling for structural change now, but this is an old cry. And so, but we just can't simply reform. That we got to dismantle and create new systems, and new systems that can serve us all. And I'll just stop right there for right now.
Ms. Ragsdale, we appreciate that wisdom and your advocacy and the work that you have done throughout your adult life to change some of those systems locally. And so we are an admirer of your work. So thank you very much for the service that you have provided to the city. Reverend Butler, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I mentioned the Reverend Cohn's work on Melton and Martin in America, and his whole introduction around the Black church and liberation theology. And of course, Malcolm was highly influenced by his faith. He was a man of deep faith, and it inspired much of his work and much of his principles and much of his belief, as was Martin, of course. But their approaches were entirely different. And nevertheless, both of their religious backgrounds formed them, and their churches supported what they were doing and helped to bring about the advances that they were trying to make. What is the role of the church today in carrying that message forward? How do you see your role in that?
First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to just be a part of a panel of historical figures and individuals who have, from Diane Ragsdale to Bailey to Thomas Muhammad. I'm just honored to be part of this conversation. And also my dear friend, Jorge Baldur. But I will say the role of the church hasn't changed. I think sometimes in business, they talk about this notion of mission drift. I think the church, after the civil rights, some gains had been made. I feel like the church had moved into a mission drift, a mission creep, and was more interested in prosperity preaching and building bigger buildings and trying to pack as many people in. And as a pastor, Jesus only had 12 disciples and some others who were part of that crew, and we're still talking about the work that they did. And I believe that work was about liberating people. So I think the work of the church hasn't changed. I think we've got to recapture our prophetic voice. I also believe that is part of the reason why you have a whole generation of young adults who have no interest in the church because they don't see the church as a vehicle for social justice and change. And I think those churches who actually step up in that arena will draw and attract this population of young men and women. And also it's somewhat of a travesty and tragedy, more so a tragedy, that today, when we think about the social justice movement today, it is not being fueled by the church. Historically, when we think about most movements in our society, especially in the African-American community, it has been the church who was at the forefront of driving that kind of movement. But I also think that just reflects that we have moved, we've engaged in this mission drift, and it's time to get back on point and reclaim a role and responsibility and walk alongside those on the Black Lives Matter front and work to cast a vision for who we are and what we can be, and our responsibility in that as community of faith.
I appreciate those words. Many years ago now, we had a white evangelical pastor in Dallas say, if your church or your pastor is preaching social justice, you should run. You should run to another church. Yeah. And so my church that I was involved with at the time, we did just that. We created a 5K run where all the proceeds would go to support social justice organizations. So I know that some white congregations really do the work and they get it right. But over the last 4 years, we've seen the white evangelicals, I don't know what has happened there, but it seems, talk about mission drift, it seems a little odd. And I'm just wondering, when you say that the churches were responsible or were behind a lot of these movements, tell us a little bit about the movements that you're working on and some of the areas that you're trying to bring folks together. I know you have a couple of organizations and you're doing things under your umbrella there.
Yeah. Well, we have one. I recognize that I think we've got to get some of our white brothers and sisters educated. Carter G. Woodson wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. We actually have, and I think that's part of the documentary that was presented is part of the miseducation of America and the re-education of this country in a proper context. And so what we're trying to do is connect people who have an interest and concern, because I think there are people who recognize that things need to change. And I'm not talking about African Americans, I'm talking about people that don't look like us. And we're trying to connect them in a way that allows them to be part of a movement. And so, for example, when George Floyd was murdered, I mean, everybody, if you're Black and you have some white friends, you probably got a call and say, what can I do? And so how do you respond to that? So through Project Unity, we're trying to address and speak to that very question, to engage people from wherever they are. And some of us are completely, and I believe all people are at some stage of a continuum. There are those who are woke and there are those who are completely asleep. And I don't care where you are. I'm trying to meet you where you are, because I think I want to create more allies and fewer adversaries in the space of race relations and addressing racism and help to guide and navigate through education, relationship building, to advance this cause, and recognizing that if Black folk could have solved the issue of racism in America, we would have done it a long time ago without white folk. We need them, and and I think we've got to get those who have a heart, who have a level of interest, educated, and get them on board to help move this thing along.
Tony, formerly I'm educated as a nurse. My undergrad degree is in nursing. I'm a RN, and I look at the pandemic, and I really left nursing to, in essence, move toward the creation of a community-based nonprofit that would confront the social determinants of health. And so what are you saying here? only 20% of total health outcomes are determined by access to quality health services. Only 20% of total health outcomes are determined by access to quality health services. And so what happens with the other? The other thing is that the other percentage, 50%, happen to be linked to the absence of affordable, decent housing, the absence of food security, the absence of full employment with a living wage, a good income, the absence of education, the absence of mental health care. And so we got to, if we're talking about really trying to promote wellness and the prevention of illness, we got to address these adverse social determinants of health. And this is where the structural change comes into play. We cannot continue to reform and reform. We got to dismantle some of these systems and create new ones in order to meet the needs of the people. And so I believe in the accessibility and the affordability of health institutions within the community. But the bottom line, most of the money got to be directed to why people are ill in the first place, got to be directed to the underlying causes, got to be directed to the social determinants of health, that people need affordable, decent housing. People need food, need a decent quality food. And this is before the pandemic. The pandemic highlights this issue. Yeah. And people need a full employment with a living wage. People need direct basic income, like the $600, like the $1,400. People need that on a regular basis. People need to have full employment with a living wage. People need transportation. And so we're talking about confronting the social determinants of health. And so what I did was made a shift from the nursing in the hospital to, in essence, addressing the causes of illnesses with community-based development nonprofit institution. And I think that is what we have to do. We have to confront these social determinants of health, the adverse social determinants of health, with structural change, with changing, with the creation of new systems. And that cannot continue to be with reforms. You cannot repair that which is already rotten, like I've said before, with systemic racism. We must indeed dismantle the system and create new systems to meet the needs of the people.
Understood. And I think more and more people are starting to understand the systemic nature of these issues and how complicated and difficult and how systems are actually constructed to work against certain groups of people and in favor of others. And I think that is finally, you know, the cover is being taken off of that. Now, whether we can proceed with the right actions around that, that is another story. Professor Bailey, tell me how you think about it. Have, you know, when I'm watching the film and I'm seeing the efforts that were made around voting rights for African Americans, and then you're contrasting it by what's happening in the news today, when across the country there is legislation trying to restrict voting rights, you have to wonder, have we made any progress? Professor Bailey, in your looking back and looking forward, where do you think we are? What's the state of the union in your opinion?
I think we're basically very much where we were 50 years ago when Brother Malcolm and Dr. King, you know, were assassinated. I've tried to give that a lot of thought, and what I would like to see happen, especially in the Black community, is a kind of a national organization, and then within that with the national organization, then you would have different divisions. You would have an economic division, a cultural division, a political division, education division, a health division, a technology division, a legal division, and a self-defense division. And each one of these areas, each one of those divisions would work and focus in that particular area. So if something come up where we need to deal with politics, it would be in this, with economics here, looking after health here. And I think that more than anything else, that would begin to force us to organize We got to get out of this idea that things just happen and these spontaneous things are going to bring something happen. So we start chanting, you know, and for a couple of days. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. You need something that is solid, sustainable, and that is organized. And as I said before, you have a national organization with those divisions, and that's the kind of thing that I learned from being around Brother Malcolm and listening to him when I was involved with him, and as the brother was saying about speaking to white people, Brother Malcolm, in a message that he spoke to young people, he said that he had a message for sincere, what he called quote unquote sincere whites. He said that you organize in your community, the people who think like you organize them, and you all get together, and then you all work on the other people in your community, you know, who may have more white supremacist type of attitudes, and then, you know, and probably every now and then, you know, we would meet with you and discuss how things were going and that kind of thing, and so I think that if we would pay some kind of attention and start really getting serious in the Black community, I've become very, very, most people that have become too harsh about the Black community. Because my position when things happen nowadays, I basically say, this is what happens to a group of people who resolutely refuse to organize a national movement to promote and protect their interests. And then somebody said, well, you know, Black people are not going to do that. Then I say, then pay the consequences. Now that may sound cold, but that's basically where I am now. These things happen if you don't organize. There's some things that are going to happen to you.
Well, we have Reverend Butler on the call. Just tell him to go do it.
Yes, I heard the young brothers. I thought that what he was saying sounded very, very good.
Yeah.
So maybe sometime in 2021 or 2022, there should be an attempt to pull together this type of meeting. People who believe in the necessity.
He can organize other philanthropists and they can fund it. We can figure this out right now.
Yes, because I think that would be very, very, and break those 8 divisions: economic, cultural, political, education, health, legal, technology, and self-defense. I mean, I think that would be phenomenal. And in each one of those areas, you would have highly qualified people who would work in those areas. And when anything broke in that area, that's where they would focus on. Instead of everybody trying to focus on everything, you know, everybody would focus in their arena and come up with the best ideas and the best suggestions and the best moves for action and the best way, you know, that kind of thing. I really truly believe that we want to really pay tribute to Brother Malcolm and Dr. King and Medgar Evers and all of those people who put their lives on the line and gave their lives up. That would be the best way to do it.
So Dr. Bailey, we do through Project Unity, we focus on programs called Together We Like, Together We Dine, Together We Serve, etc. What you just described is a platform that we're envisioning because there are pillars that sustain community. And what you're talking about is sustaining community. And we're calling that Together We Build. And linking back to what Diane just talked about in terms of, you know, health, I mean, you know, health and wellness. And Diane, you know, we're literally in the process of trying to figure out how we upend the healthcare system, because it's set up for sick people. You get paid when someone's sick. And how do we, you know, begin to create a structure? And this is the thing to it. If you can figure out how to monetize it, you will draw interest to it. In trying to, you know, use systems that people have used against us, monetary systems, to our favor. So creating and using innovation to disrupt a structure that hasn't been working in our favor is some of the mindset and thinking that we are trying to put forward.
I want to ask Thomas, if you can turn your mic back on for a minute. You're listening to this conversation, and this is born out of your inspiration. How do you feel? How does it make you feel to hear this kind of a conversation around what you inspired and what you brought to life and the education that you have offered as a result of your film product? And I think you're still on mute, Thomas. Are you able to go off mute for a minute?
How's that?
There you go. That's good.
Okay.
How do you feel listening to this conversation? We can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, it's sounding very strong and definitely the right direction. And I'm just really pleased that Diane articulated what I've been feeling since really age 16, you know, because that's when I was recruited by SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Dallas. And, you know, our chairman at the time was Stokely Carmichael. And our vice chairman was H. Rap Brown, you know, burn, baby, burn, you know, but what was more important is that those two left SNCC and joined the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense in Oakland, California. And Stokely had been a part of young folk in Lowndes County, Alabama, and founded the Black Panther Party as they were recruiting and registering Black folk to vote in elections. And they were inspired by Malcolm. And when they joined the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, they came into an organization that was also inspired by Malcolm. And that organizing led them to produce a number of programs in self-help and self-determination. You know, the free breakfast and free lunch and programs in the community. And Diane Ragsdale comes from that background because she was a part of the Dallas Black Panther Party. And it dawns on me that during that same period, she was in the same church, Kirkwood Temple CME, and was teaching Sunday school. You know, and to this day, she still teaches Sunday school at that church because, again, it's not about talking, it's about doing. And she did that while she was serving on the Dallas City Council and doing this awesome work that people heard about her across the country to a point that Lenora Fulani, coming out of New York, running as an independent for president of the United States, was making a huge impression across the country. And the person she chose as a running mate was Diane Ragsdale. You know? And Diane, of course, decided that no, she wanted to do local politics and turn her down. But I'm just saying that to say this is what Malcolm inspired, you know, that it's not about talking, it's about doing. And I'll say this and I'm done, that right now we're hearing about all this thing about Republicans returning or overturning or, you know, restricting voting rights. Look, listen to Malcolm and Ballot or the Bullet. That brother breaks down politics like you never, like you, I mean, he was just awesome. He talked about gerrymandering, all of that in that piece, and how you can control all the White House, the Senate, and the Congressional House, and you still can't do anything because they will fix it where you don't go and do anything. even if you control all of that. They showed us that right now. Look at what Biden's going through right now, you know, and not just from Republicans, but from his own party. So it's about self-determination. And again, if you can inspire many folk like Diane, like, as we call him George, but we know he's secretly named Jorge. But, you know, and Richie Butler. I mean, you know, that's what Malcolm talked about. He said to Black folk, stop fighting each other. We have a common enemy. We have a common enemy. And these are the kind of folk that you want to recruit into this movement. And I'll say this and I'm done. My good friend who narrated our film, Bob Ray Sanders, just called me just a moment ago because I called him earlier, but he just called me just a moment. But he reminds me though, when you know the history of Bob Ray Sanders, you know, it was phenomenal to have him as a narrator for this film on what he brings, the legacy that he brings. You know, again, Malcolm pulled all kinds of people together to work on a common goal, to do the things that we need to do to take care of business for our own people. And so I just hope that people across the country get a chance to view this film and get out of that notion about Malcolm is bad and King is good. They both were human beings. And you should stop, listen, and study the phenomenal work that these brothers did. That includes King, you know, as in Pastor Richie Butler's church right now. He's a senior pastor of the church of the Dr. Reverend Zan Holmes, Jr. When you go in that church, you see the history of our people from Africa all the way to America, the sojourn there. And at the end of that, he details the story also of Brother Malcolm. And people ask, well, why you do that? He said, look, you can't tell our history without telling the history of Malcolm. You can't do it, you know? And so that's what I'm hoping that people get from this is that, yeah, we can work together. We can do things together. And we must do things, especially when you look at what's happening with this COVID-19 thing. I mean, it shows you that we need each other. Right. It pulled the scab off the sore. And now we're exposed. And so I'm hoping that that's where we move to as we end this piece. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Thomas, and your words. I think what you said about Malcolm drawing people together, I think that this is evidence that he is still doing that. And the film is a powerful vehicle for that to happen. You know, I was very struck, Reverend Butler, at the scene in your church of the stained glass windows of both Malcolm and Martin in the church and in the sanctuary. I'm going to give you the last few words of any comment that you might have to our audience and to future audiences that watch this about the role of Malcolm X in your own life and in the life of the community.
Wow. First and foremost, you know, Malcolm was a Muslim, and, you know, those who don't fully comprehend or appreciate the fact that God was with him, and so grateful that he was a man of immeasurable faith that led him to recognize what we call in the Christian community, when Moses, you know, went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." You know, Malcolm also echoed that same clarion call, and just tying it all together. You know, at our church, it was just mentioned. You know, it reflects the importance that we are not an island unto ourselves. As St. Luke, we are part of a larger community. And if we don't connect with our Muslim brothers and sisters, and if we don't connect with what Diane is doing at her organization and what Jorge are doing, you know, we will miss the opportunity to bring this fabric together to really be about the transformational change that I believe as a pastor, God is calling us to address and to make happen. And it's time out for us to talk about Jesus and to quote unquote sit in the church and sit at his feet. We're called to be the feet of Jesus, the hands and eyes. And when we do that, truly transformation and change will come in a way that none of us have seen. And I just don't think we recognize our power and our strength. And part of that is our collective will to come together and be about that business.
Well, I am so grateful to each of you that you were willing to come together. My team is telling me that our time is up for this conversation. We are going to leave, and if any of the panelists can stay and join the other Zoom link, the partners at Social Venture Partners who are dedicated, men and women dedicated to making and working on systemic change issues in our community. Our partners are going to be having a conversation about how this film and how this conversation can inspire them to do more and more of this kind of work here in our city. And so once again, thank you for the inspiration, for the beauty, for the work that you all put into bringing this film to life. We are grateful to you for not only that, but for the years of service that you have given to the entire community. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to being with you again. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.